2 months after our divorce, her sister showed up at my door. What she said next left me completely stunned. The doorbell rang at 9:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I knew, before I even opened it, that the life I had been trying to stitch back together was about to rip wide open again. I stood there in the same gray sweatpants I'd worn for 3 days straight, the ones Emily used to steal from my drawer and roll at the waist because they swallowed her whole, and I stared through the peephole at a face that looked like hers but wasn't. Sarah. Her younger sister. The one who had always been the louder laugh, the sharper tongue, the one who texted me memes at 2 a.m. when Emily was asleep beside me. Sarah, who hadn't spoken to me since the day I moved out. Her eyes were red-rimmed, mascara smudged into faint bruises under them, and her knuckles were white around the strap of a canvas tote that looked heavy with something other than groceries. I opened the door because I'm an idiot, because some part of me still believed that if I just kept the door open, Emily might walk through it one day and say she'd made a mistake. Sarah didn't wait for me to speak. She pushed past me into the apartment that still smelled faintly of the lavender candle Emily loved, the one I couldn't bring myself to throw away even though it mocked me every time I lit it. "I can't do this anymore," she said, voice cracking like thin ice. "I can't keep lying for her." My stomach dropped so fast I tasted metal. I closed the door behind her, leaned against it like it could hold me up, and asked the only question that mattered. "What did she do, Sarah?" She dropped the tote on the coffee table, and out spilled a stack of printed emails, a flash drive, a Polaroid of Emily and me from our first anniversary, her laughing with cake on her nose, and a pregnancy test. Negative. I stared at that little plastic stick like it was a loaded gun. Sarah sank onto the couch, buried her face in her hands, and started talking so fast I had to strain to catch every word. "It wasn't just the affair, Jake. It was never just the affair. She planned it. From the beginning. She wanted out, but she didn't want to be the bad guy. So she set it up so you'd find out in the worst possible way, so you'd be the one to end it, so she could play the victim to Mom and Dad and all her friends." I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. I grabbed the back of the armchair to steady myself, knuckles aching. "Start from the beginning," I said, and my voice sounded like someone else's, someone who hadn't spent the last 8 weeks replaying every fight, every silence, every time Emily came home late smelling like someone else's cologne and swore it was just the bar at the office happy hour. Sarah took a shaky breath. "You remember the trip to Lisbon?" The one she said was a work conference. I nodded. Of course I remembered. I'd driven her to the airport at 4 a.m., kissed her goodbye, told her to text me when she landed. She'd sent a selfie from the gate, sunglasses on, peace sign, caption, "Off to conquer Europe, miss you already." I'd saved it. Still had it. Sarah continued. She wasn't in Lisbon. She was in Asheville with Mark. The whole time. They'd been seeing each other for 6 months by then. She told me everything, Jake. How she met him at that networking event in Charlotte. How he made her feel seen, in a way you never did. Her words, not mine. Sarah's voice broke on the last part, and she looked at me like she was begging me to forgive her for repeating it. I picked up one of the emails. It was dated 3 weeks before I found the texts on her phone, the ones that ended us. Emily to Mark. "He's starting to ask questions. I need to speed this up. Can you be at the lake house this weekend? I'll tell him I'm visiting Sarah." Another one, 2 days later. "I left my necklace in your car on purpose. He'll find it. He always checks the glove box when he borrows my car." My hands shook so badly the paper rattled. I remembered that necklace. A delicate gold chain with a tiny crescent moon. I'd found it tangled in the seatbelt of her SUV, asked her about it, and she'd looked me dead in the eye and said, "Oh, that's Sarah's." She must have left it when I picked her up from the airport. Sarah, who hadn't flown anywhere in a year. I looked at her now, sitting on my couch, and felt something inside me calcify. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, tears spilling over. "She made me promise. Said if I told you, she'd cut me out of her life. She's my sister, Jake. My only sister. But watching her lie to your face every Sunday dinner, Watching you bring her coffee in bed even after she stopped saying thank you, she choked on a sob. I couldn't do it anymore. I found these in her desk when I was helping her pack for the new apartment. She kept everything. Like trophies. I sat down hard on the floor, back against the couch, and stared at the pregnancy test. Whose was this? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Sarah wiped her nose with the sleeve of her hoodie. My hoodie actually, the one Emily had stolen and never returned. Hers. From 2 months before you split. She thought she might be pregnant. Wasn't sure if it was yours or his. Took the test in my bathroom while I held her hair back. When it was negative, she cried. Not from relief, Jake. She cried because it would have been easier if it was yours. She could have used it to trap you into staying, or to blame you for leaving. Either way, she wouldn't have to admit what she'd done. I laughed then, a sound like breaking glass. Because of course.
Of course Emily had calculated even that. The woman who color-coded our spice rack, who made pros and cons lists for everything from buying a new couch to whether we should get a dog, had turned our marriage into a spreadsheet of exits. I thought of the nights I'd held her while she cried about how stressed she was at work, how I'd rubbed her back and whispered that we'd get through it together. I thought of the way she'd looked at me the morning I moved out, eyes dry, voice calm. I think this is for the best, Jake. We both need space to grow. Space to grow. What a tidy little phrase for. I've been sleeping with my coworker for a year and I'm done pretending. Sarah reached into the tote again and pulled out a small notebook. Emily's. The one she used to jot down grocery lists and appointment reminders. Sarah flipped it open to a page marked with a paperclip. Read this, she said. I took it with fingers that felt numb. Emily's neat, looping handwriting. Timeline. Tell Jay about promotion lie. Plant evidence week of October 15th. Girls trip November 2nd to November 5th. File papers November 20th. Goal. He initiates divorce by December. Keep house in settlement. Emotional leverage. Underneath in smaller letters. If he fights for me, reconsider? The question mark was underlined 3 times. I closed the notebook. Set it on the table like it might explode. She thought I might fight for her, I said. My voice sounded far away. Sarah nodded. She underestimated you. Thought you'd beg. When you didn't, when you just signed the papers and left, she panicked. Started telling everyone you'd been controlling, distant, that you'd pushed her away. But I was there, Jake. I saw you try. God, I saw you try so hard. The room was too quiet. Outside, a car alarm went off down the block, then stopped. I looked at the Polaroid on the table. Emily's cake-smeared grin, my arm around her waist. Both of us so stupidly happy. I picked it up, tore it in half, then in half again until the pieces were confetti on the rug. Sarah didn't stop me. What happens now? I asked. She shrugged, helpless. I don't know. I needed you to know the truth. All of it. Before she rewrites the story so completely that even you start to believe her version. I stood up, legs shaky, and walked to the window. The street below was empty except for a stray cat picking its way across the asphalt. 2 months ago, I'd stood in this exact spot watching Emily's taillights disappear after she dropped off the last box of my things. I told myself it was closure. Clean break. Now I understood there's no such thing as clean when someone's been bleeding you out for a year, and you never felt the knife. Sarah's voice came from behind me, soft. She's pregnant now, Jake. For real this time. Marks. She told Mom last week. They're naming it Lily if it's a girl. I closed my eyes. Lily was the name we'd picked out if we ever had a daughter. Emily had whispered it to me one night in bed. Her head on my chest, fingers tracing circles on my skin. Lily Grace, she'd said. After your grandmother. I turned around. Sarah was crying again, silently. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should have told you sooner. I was scared. But you deserve to know she didn't just leave. She orchestrated every step of your heartbreak. I looked at the wreckage on my coffee table. The emails, the notebook, the negative test, the shredded photo. Evidence of a betrayal so meticulous it felt like performance art. And in the center of it all, that lavender candle flickered, throwing shadows on the wall that looked almost like wings. I picked up the candle, held it for a moment, then blew it out. The scent lingered, cloying and sweet, a ghost of the life I'd thought was real. Sarah stood, slung the empty tote over her shoulder. "I'll go," she said. I needed to give you the truth. Whatever you do with it is up to you." At the door she paused. "For what it's worth, she's not happy, Jake. She thought she would be. But she's not." I didn't answer. Couldn't. After she left, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren. Eventually, I picked up the pieces of the Polaroid, smoothed them out on the table. Emily's smile was fractured now, split down the middle, but still there. Still beautiful. Still a lie. I thought about calling her. About driving to her new apartment and throwing the notebook at her feet, and demanding to know how she could look me in the eye every day and plan my destruction like it was just another Tuesday. But I didn't. Because the truth Sarah had brought me wasn't just about Emily's betrayal. It was about mine. I'd loved a version of her that never existed. I'd built a life on quicksand and called it solid ground. And the most devastating part? Some small, stubborn part of me still wanted to fix it. Still wanted to believe that if I'd just been better, tried harder, noticed sooner, she wouldn't have needed to escape. But that's the thing about love, it doesn't keep receipts. It doesn't tally up the nights you stayed up waiting or the mornings you made her favorite pancakes, or the way you learned to fold her laundry exactly the way she liked it. It just asks you to keep showing up, even when the person you're showing up for has already left the building. I gathered the emails, the notebook, the test, the photo fragments, and carried them to the kitchen. Opened the trash can. Hesitated. Then slowly, deliberately, I put them all in a shoebox instead. Taped it shut. Wrote Emily on top in black Sharpie. Not because I wanted to keep her lies, but because I needed to remember that some wounds don't heal clean. Some truths are too jagged to swallow whole. And sometimes the only way to move forward is to carry the weight of what was so you never mistake it for what is. I left the box on the highest shelf in the closet, behind the winter coats I wouldn't need for months. Then I opened the window, let the night air in. And for the first time in 2 months, I didn't light the lavender candle. I didn't need to. The scent of her was finally starting to fade. And the lasting truth I carry now, the one that keeps me awake and keeps me moving, is this: love isn't the lie. The lie is believing that someone else gets to decide your worth. Emily didn't just break my heart. She handed me the pieces and dared me to rebuild something stronger. I'm still working on the blueprint, but I'm doing it alone this time. And that, finally, feels like mercy.